Hi, this is Dr. Janae DeVica, and I'm here with my good friend David Bruce Leonard. And today we're going to be talking all about the adrenaline response and how that can either help or hinder your health.
Hi, Janae. How are you?
I'm awesome, thank you.
Right.
I'm in Maui, which
I know,
is
right?
dropping my stress response.
Who could complain?
Seriously, can't
Right.
complain.
Yeah.
I love David, and he has taught me so much, even in just the last week that I've been hanging out with him. And I wanted him to share some of his wisdom with you, so that's why we're here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you've come from?
Well, I live on Maui. I practice Chinese medicine here. I'm an aspiring polymath, so I like to do lots of different things with varying degrees of success. But I practice Chinese medicine here. I teach plant medicine. I also teach women's self-defense and personal security. And my partner, Jody Baygood, and I also teach sacred sexuality, and nature skills. So we have our hands full.
And I would have never thought all of those things sort of pointed towards the adrenaline response and how that works in health, but you've been opening my eyes big time to like all the different ways that we're hyperadrenalized and lots of tools about how to create a more healthy stress response and to bring that down. So
yeah,
let's just start from the beginning.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I was surprised when I started realizing how common my own personal adrenal response is in my life, how it permeates everything, and it directly increases or decreases my quality of life depending on how I choose to navigate my nervous system.
So as many of you know, I am recovering from several years of serious illness, and a big part of that illness was adrenal fatigue and adrenal collapse. And I've had to learn, it was a matter of life and death. I had to learn how to really modulate my stress response and how to be in the parasympathetic response more than I'm in the sympathetic response. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But I've had to completely change my lifestyle, my mindset, my reactions, my environment. I've had to change everything. And because it's been a matter of life and death for me, I've had to change it and change it fairly quickly. And the health and the wellness that it's brought me on so many levels is just amazing. And I've been getting comments from many people. I noticed that I'm getting the same sort of, illnesses that you're talking about. Like, what do I do? So that's why I want to sit here and have this talk with you today, is so that we can share with our viewers, like, how do you recognize when the stress response is making you sick, and what are some tools you can use to change your environment and change your reactions and change the things that are making you ill so that you can create wellness in your life?
Absolutely. Great. Yeah. There are two parts to the human nervous system. I'm really simplifying and generalizing. There's the sympathetic response and the parasympathetic response. The sympathetic response is what we call fight, flight, or freeze. It's run by adrenaline. And the parasympathetic part of the nervous system is what we call rest and digest, or feed and fornicate. And that is run by acetylcholine. And the sympathetic nervous system, which is the adrenal part, is kind of like the gas. And the parasympathetic response is kind of like the brakes.
And I like to think of, I can't even remember where I heard this, but I heard one time, like, your sympathetic nervous system is like a cat when it's all scared and pissed off, like, right? And then the parasympathetic is when the cat is laying in a nice warm windowsill, just like chilling out,
purring,
licking its paws and purring.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And I found that that's really interesting because I can kind of like think about that in myself, like, how am I feeling right now? Like the cat,
right,
like this, or
exactly.
like,
Am I relaxed? Am I comfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we are adrenalized, we physiologically change when we have adrenal stress. We under high adrenaline states, we lose peripheral vision. Our foveal vision becomes very focused. We literally can't see on the sides of our outer vision. We have auditory exclusion. We literally cannot hear. We have what we call tachypsyche, or time distortion. I don't know if you've ever been in a car accident, but time will seem to slow down. There's all these intense physiological responses when we're under adrenal stress.
And on the inside of us, biochemically, what's happening is our digestion is shutting down,
Right.
because you can't run away from the tiger and digest your food at the same time. So digestion shuts down, your immune system shuts down, all your blood is shunted from, full body circulation into your limbs, so
Right.
you can run and fight, into a small part of your brain so that your alertness is increased and enhanced, and basically the rest of your body is left behind until the emergency is over.
Right, right. We move into our amygdala, into our reptile brain or our frog brain, and we lose the ability to cognate in our frontal lobes, to think clearly when we're in a high adrenaline state.
Absolutely. Okay, so our stress response is our primary survival mechanism. So our stress response is very important to keep us alive.
Absolutely.
And to keep us
That's
well.
right.
However, our stress response is meant to be used for acute situations. It's meant to
Right.
be used quickly and then turn off and put us back into the parasympathetic response relatively quickly, so that our body can get back into normal functioning again. Now, when we are in the adrenal response, which is what we're going to be calling hyperadrenalized, right? When we have this adrenal response going, and it's happening for long periods of time, that's really an inappropriate function of our stress response. It's
Right.
not meant to happen for long periods of time. So because when your stress response, when you're adrenalized, you're not digesting, you're not resting, your cells aren't reproducing, you're not healing, your immune system's down. If you stay in that state for very long, it starts creating chronic illness.
Right.
When you're in that stress response, we talked about inflammation. Your inflammatory response goes way up while you're in that stress response. And so if you stay in hyperadrenalized for very long, you're going to start noticing the symptoms of chronic illness, like heart disease, depression, anxiety, mental fog and confusion, muscle pain, and if it goes on too long, things like autoimmune disorders.
Right. And in our society, the main way I see that is what my Chinese teachers call time disease. That's where we don't give ourselves enough time to get things done. So if you want to stress somebody for a study, you make them do math on a computer, and then you shorten the amount of time it takes them to do that. So, and that's in my life, that's what happens. Right now, for the last 20, 25 years, I've driven like an old man, like a little old man, very slowly. But that happened because I realized when I was driving to work, when I was at an office in Carmel, it would take me 45 minutes to drive there, and I would be really amped up, and I would drive fast, and I would get angry at people, and that would ruin my quality of life. So time disease, not giving ourselves enough time to get things done in the day, is, at least what I see, is the main cause of adrenal stress in our society.
That's a big deal, and especially for all you super women out there who I work with,
right.
right? Like, you're working a job, you've got your kids, you're trying to save the world, and you're doing the job of 3 or 4 or 5 super women at the same time, and not giving yourself enough time to slow down and get into that parasympathetic response.
Exactly. So there's a bunch of different things you can do in your life when you find yourself overly stressed, or when you feel you have time disease. One of the things that I'll do if I'm late for an appointment is I'll walk to my car in slow motion.
Ooh.
And I'll
How does
just
that work?
walk really slowly.
Like, actually in slow motion?
Literally. It'll take me maybe 5 minutes to walk 20 feet.
Wow.
Or maybe 3 minutes to walk 20 feet, but I'll just move really slowly. And by doing that, I'm going to be 3 more minutes late, but when I get in my car, I'm like relaxed.
Okay. Totally forcing
So that's a
yourself
really
to
good
slow down.
tool. Yeah, forcing
Okay.
your body to move very slowly. That could also go into Tai Chi or Qigong, or anything where you're just your body is controlling your mental response. You're using
Okay.
your physical body, your somatic body, to control your mental response.
Okay. As I was getting trained how to slow down and get into the parasympathetic to heal my body, I had several friends and coaches who were around me most of the time, and I asked them, to keep reminding me to slow down. So normally I'm a person that's like, I'm very snappy, I'm very fast, I talk really fast, I get things done really fast, I'm always zooming around. And I established a bunch of accountability partners who would tell me, slow down. And they would actually make me like say the same thing again, slower, or do the same thing again, slower. And it really brought my attention to how subconsciously I was just, even if I didn't think I was stressed, I was still zooming around and talking fast and doing everything fast. And that created such like this like stress response in my body that I didn't even realize. And when I started doing it slow and talking slow and people telling me slow down, like it's amazing how instantly I could just feel a settling. Yeah.
So there's a number of different tools we can use. One of them is moving slowly. One of them is what I call still point, which is a very simple practice where we close our eyes, we relax our jaw, we let our jaw fall open, and then we imagine we're looking at the back of our eyes from the back of our head. And we just go over and over and over again. So we close our eyes, let our eyes sink back into our head, relax our jaw, and then imagine we're looking at the back of our eyes from the back of our head. And our mouth actually stays open. So that's one way of doing it. That's a really, and you can do that for anywhere between, 10 seconds or 10 years, whatever.
Right.
As a
Just doing
meditative
it
state.
right now, when you were talking about it, I was doing it, and I felt my shoulders kind of drop.
Right.
And I felt my body do this kind of like exhale sort of sensation.
Yeah.
And I almost felt, the sensation like right before you go to sleep, how you just get kind of dizzy and your body gets tingly and you're just kind of like dissociating. Like just doing it for whatever, 15 seconds while you're talking about it, I was noticing.
That's a parasympathetic state. You cannot fall asleep when in a high adrenaline state. You
Right.
have to be in a parasympathetic state. And in Chinese medicine, we say that the yang qi rises as stress increases. So you can feel your body as you're dropping into that relaxed state sink. Okay.
So some people think they have to meditate for hours to get relaxed, but that took 15 seconds?
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
very quick.
Yeah. And something else you can do is track what's happening in your body. We call it somatic tracking or somatic awareness, right?
Yeah.
So just noticing any time when you're feeling something, notice any emotion. Where are you feeling that in your body? And we're going to talk about this a little later when we talk about some Tibetan practices. But where am I feeling a sensation? This is also what we teach in our nature skills class. When people are out in the woods, where am I feeling, wind, heat, cold, touch? Where am I feeling? Just tracking what's happening in our body will naturally make everything slow down.
So doing this in the way I learned it was, mind-blowing for me to do it in a value-neutral way.
Exactly.
Right?
No judgment.
Right, no judgment at all. So can we just take our viewers through a couple examples now? Now, first of all, doing it in a value-neutral way, but also there's feelings of body sensations and there's also feelings of emotions.
Right. So when I do this, I'm focusing on, if emotions come up, I ignore the emotion and I focus on the sensation
Stay on
that
the
the
body
emotion.
sensation.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so let's just go through a really quick run through of what value neutral sensation noticing would look like.
Okay. So if I'm with my partner and we're having an argument and we're both waiting for the other person to take a breath so we can get our word in, right? We go back and forth. If I notice my anger or my aggression or my rage and I just feel it in my body, I don't judge it.
That's an emotion. So your anger and your rage is the emotion.
Exactly.
But what's the sensation?
The sensation is value neutral.
Right.
It's
So
just a sensation.
what's the sensation?
So I would feel well, it depends on the kind of anger I'm feeling. But my typically my throat tightens. I feel my shoulders lift. I'll lean forward. My breathing becomes more shallow. Right. So that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and I would
that's the
just
difference
notice
between
that.
body sensations and emotions. So when people say, "I'm feeling so angry,"
Right.
you need to actually go deeper than that to the body sensation. My chest is feeling tight. My throat is feeling tight. I'm feeling
Exactly.
hot.
Right. And the word feeling has two meanings. It can be an emotion or it can be a sensation. And we're talking about sensations in the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And what does that do when you just start
I
focusing
have no idea
on
how it works.
You don't know
I
how
don't
it
have a
works.
clue.
It just does.
It just works,
It
right?
just works. Okay.
It also brings us home. It brings us home to who we are, because my personal belief is that we're disconnected from the neck down, And that's the same reason we can't feel the earth. We don't take care of our environment because we can't feel stuff. We're so used to all our energy being up, we're talking heads, we have all these great ideas, but we're not feeling. If we could really feel what's happening around us, we would never allow these things to happen. We would never allow a forest to be clear cut if we could feel our bodies. So it's a reclamation. It's something that we deserve as human beings, and it allows us to bring ourselves home.
Yeah, and our sensations, our body sensations, is how we connect with our environment.
Exactly.
It's how we
Or
connect.
not.
Right, or not.
Right.
So being in our body sensations is how I connect with you as a person,
Right.
how I connect with the environment around me, the house we're in, the sounds outside. So what I'm feeling, hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, our body sensations,
Right.
that's how we interact with our environment, and our environment is basically what shapes us.
And I believe that our body is our shadow or unconscious mind. We're going to talk more about that later, and that the earth is our shadow or unconscious mind. So the more we can drop down here, the more we come home to who we are and to a natural state. Another way that we can drop from a sympathetic adrenalized state to a parasympathetic state is doing different kinds of breathing exercises. Now there's hundreds of breathing exercises, but one way to do it is to do a 4-count breath. So inhale to the count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, inhale for 4, etc. So it's a square pattern.
Does it matter if you breathe through your nose or your mouth?
I like exhaling from my nose through my mouth because it relaxes my jaw, and that is part of still point. But ultimately, I don't know how much effect it has, but that's what I do.
Okay.
A lot of times when we're tense, our jaw is tight, and all we need to do to relax our whole bodies is to, like if I'm at the dentist and he's doing work, I'll relax my jaw.
Right.
My hands too. I'll relax my jaw and my hands, and then it's less painful and I'm more present. So.
And you can actually begin putting yourself into the parasympathetic response by purposely relaxing your muscle.
Absolutely.
By relaxing your muscles.
Exactly.
So having that body awareness, like a lot of us go around with our neck tense, our shoulders up, our necks tensed, our jaw clenched, even like our arms clenched, and we don't even know it. I've been a massage therapist for years, and people come and lay on my massage table and they have knots down their neck, and they have TMJ, and they have carpal tunnel, and then as I'm working on them, I talk to them about their body awareness, and they're just clenched all the time. And so teaching them how to on purpose several times a day, pay attention, just be aware of what's your jaw doing, what's your neck doing, what are your arms doing.
Exactly.
And then doing the one thing that I love doing is tense and release, because sometimes it's like if your body is in a state of tension all the time, that's your normal, you don't really know what relaxation is. So what you do is if you have a tight jaw, you actually clench it as hard as you can on purpose. Clench your fists, clench your jaw, clench your shoulders as hard as you can. And you can do this during the square breathing, actually. Clench it as hard as you can, and then on the exhale,
right, the Chinese say
it.
that's extreme yang turns to yin. So if we're tight, we make it more tight, and that'll make us more relaxed.
and then you can
ultimately.
feel the difference between tight and loose, between clenched and unclenched. And so I found it very helpful if to practice the square breathing, but then while you're square breathing, you can also practice the clench and release of the muscles to retrain your body how to be relaxed.
Exactly. And another way to deal with general stress or time disease or hyperadrenal states is just to stretch the tendons. The Chinese say when you have liver qi stagnation, which is another way of describing stress or time disease, if you just stretch, doing yoga, doing any kind of stretching exercises is just really good for you. Massage, hypnosis, these are all things that will help drop us down into a parasympathetic state.
Right.
In the mid-90s, I was a coach. I was a life coach for a few years. And in our coaching business, we had the typical client was a woman who was in her 40s, very successful and extremely unhappy. And some of our clients, within a year, we had gotten them to double their income in our coaching practice, and they were even more miserable than ever. So we stopped and reevaluated all the coaching we were doing because we thought that what they thought they wanted was what was good for them. And
Which
it
was
wasn't.
more money and a more successful business.
Right, and it's just they're on a hamster wheel. And within maybe 5 to 7 years, many of those women had autoimmune disorders. And I started thinking about that. I started thinking, why would all these women get these autoimmune disorders, Hashimoto's or Cushing's or multiple sclerosis or interstitial cystitis or all these things, lupus, yeah. And I realized, or I believe that it came from this chronic time disease, this chronic stress where, and I thought about it, I thought, well, maybe it's because as men evolved, we were better equipped physiologically to handle that kind of stress, being hunters and having to, hunt down large things and kill them. Maybe, and be involved in wars. Maybe our body was better adapted to that because I would watch men and they wouldn't get autoimmune disorders. They would just kind of keel over from a heart attack.
Heart attack and die, right, exactly.
But the women would get these autoimmune disorders. And so I started noticing that, and that was when I started connecting women's health to adrenal stress and seeing what a strong correlation there was in that.
Right, and that's probably most of the people who are watching this video right now are the women who are experiencing health problems because of their high stress load.
Right. So later on we're going to talk more about possible solutions to this, and all these things overlap. But one thing that I used to say to my clients is you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once.
Right.
You have to do one thing at a time, and to try and do everything at once and be a superwoman or a superman is crazy. It's madness, and it will destroy your quality of life.
It will. And actually, I was just, one of my clients I was talking to yesterday, we were talking about her having adrenal fatigue because she's been stressed, in this hyper-adrenalized state for so long, and she's having a hard time waking up and getting out of bed. She has muscle problems, she has digestion problems, she's gaining weight around her middle, and she was talking to me, we were talking about how she needs to just completely change her environment, like how much she's doing and how much she's sleeping and how many things she's committing to and how fast she's going. Right. And she said to me, like, okay, but I'm in this place of scarcity. I'm afraid that if I don't do all these things, if I don't work enough, that I'm not going to have enough money, and I'm and if I don't, have enough social relationships, I'll be alone. And so she was talking to me about her scarcity, and what I said to her is like, if you're going to be in a scarcity mindset about anything, what I want you to be in a scarcity mindset about is your health.
Relaxation, right.
Your health, right?
Right.
If you don't do something about this and do something about it soon, you're going to end up with an autoimmune disease. And once you're there, quality of life goes down really fast, and it's hard to turn it around. Where you're at right now with adrenal fatigue, it's going to be relatively easy to turn it around and to heal your body. If you get MS or lupus, it's not impossible to turn it around, but it's going to be much more difficult. So if you're going to insist on being in scarcity about something, please be in scarcity about your health.
Yeah, and my observation is it takes about 10 years before the autoimmune disorders start appearing. So, but yeah, start now.
Yeah.
Another thing that I would see in my coaching clients is they all had very similar psyches. They all had a mental pattern where their self-esteem came from being able to go into a situation where a corporation was in the red and everything is hell, and they would go in and they would straighten it out, and within 6 months or a year, that corporation would be in the black and running, and all their self-esteem came from
being a fixer
and ignoring the signals that their bodies were giving them, because they know if they just push through, then they'll get the attention and that they're craving, and then the self-esteem would increase. The problem is there's a price to be paid for that.
There is. Let's talk a little bit about body wisdom, like your body's innate wisdom to tell you where you're at and what you need as far as health is concerned.
Yeah, we're not trained. Nobody trains us to listen to our bodies or to notice what the sensations are when we're feeling emotions. But body wisdom is huge. Body wisdom is really critical if we're going to navigate, especially my belief is this point in our history as a species. That's the next step for us. The reclamation of the body is the reclamation of the earth. They're no different between them. So, yeah.
So how can women who are fixers, whether they're fixing their kids or their families or their companies or the world, whatever, how can women who are in that hyperadrenalized state, who are fixers, how can they start tapping into their body wisdom? Because you said earlier that it's when we start ignoring the body wisdom, saying like, oh, I'm tired, but I have to do this thing, or I don't feel good, but I can just like ignore that so I can handle this.
Right.
What are some steps we can take to actually start tapping into that body wisdom?
Well, one thing that I'll do sometimes with my patients is I'll have them buy a watch, one of those old watches from the drugstore that beeps every hour. And every hour I would have them do an exercise, and it just goes beep beep, then it goes on. I know people don't use watches anymore, but maybe you could set your phone
Cell
for
phone
that.
or something, yeah.
Yeah, so every hour you get a little beep beep, and then you just, what am I feeling in my body? Or every hour I relax my jaw and my shoulders. Or every hour I notice what I'm thinking, positive thought or negative thought, just paying attention, no judgment, just noticing. So I think that's one way of bringing us back into our body, back into the present, is with little reminders. Or some friends of mine, every time they touch a doorknob, they'll take a breath. Like that, and they go on with their lives.
I like it.
Little cues.
Yeah, and this I've learned to do something that's a little more advanced than that, but I've found that
Okay.
it helps me really become aware of what I'm doing and become responsible for what I'm doing. So when I'm in a place where, let's say, there's a job that needs to be done and my body's telling me like, oh, I'm not feeling so good or I need to rest, but I'm not at a place where I can do that. Being aware and like saying out loud, okay, I don't feel very good right now. My body's telling me that I need to go rest, or my body's telling me that I need to go eat. And right now I'm choosing not to do that.
Got it. So it
And I
becomes
know,
lucid.
right, and I know that that's negatively impacting my health. I know that by choosing not to follow my body's wisdom, I'm going to have to pay the consequences, but I'm choosing to pay the consequences so I can get this other thing done. And then I don't even change my behavior, but I'm changing my awareness
Right.
and my accountability so that when the side effects do come, right? And I'm feeling the effects of not following my body's inner wisdom, it connects the dots. So then down the road, I'm not just sick, having an autoimmune disease or having like whatever illness and being like, whatever happened, right? Like what happened to me? I've just been doing so many good things. It really connects the dots so that you realize every time you're doing that to yourself, you realize what you're doing to your body and you're making a conscious choice.
And also, it's interesting because when we go under adrenal stress, our body creates cortisol that basically allows us to survive the adrenal stress. And in studies, when they make people stress them out by making them do math on a computer and shortening the time that they have to do that, if they teach people to reframe their stress as power, their cortisol levels don't increase.
Oh, so what does that look like? How would that sound?
So, well, it's just what you were just saying. And I don't think that's a good long-term solution. You don't
Right.
want to reframe all your stress as power. But if you have to get something done, and that you feel that, first of all, you're feeling your body. You're not ignoring it. You're feeling the stress in your body, and you're saying, okay, this is power. I'm going to use this power, but then I'm going to take care of myself afterwards. So that'll both keep the cortisol levels down, and you have to fulfill your promise to rest later. And that creates the sane sine wave of life, of a healthy life, where we're busy, relaxed, busy, relaxed. We're not just busy, right?
Right.
That sine wave of life is crucial. I think it's it's what we deserve as human beings.
And
it's
that's
our
the way our
birthright.
body was designed to function.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's what makes us sick when we
why
don't
we have day and
accommodate
night,
the way
right.
that our body was designed to function.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I would love to talk about a situation that I went through myself that I know many of the viewers are going through at this time. Now, I found myself in a place where I had been a victim of domestic violence and I had to get myself and my daughter out of that situation really quickly. I didn't have an education. I didn't really have any job skills that I could go out and work. So I knew that to get myself in a better place and to get my daughter in a better place, to keep us safe, like this was a survival.
Right.
This was a situation of survival. I had to get an education, I had to get a job to pay rent, and I had to take care of my daughter, and I had to learn how to be in a different life space so that I didn't keep getting myself into abusive relationships. So that's a lot of things to put on a plate.
Right.
And so I found that as I was in school, my body wouldn't feel good. I'd feel sick, I'd feel tired, I'd feel exhausted, I wouldn't be getting enough sleep. But I knew I had this big job ahead of me that had to get done for the purpose of survival. And so what I did was I just started shutting down my body,
Right.
and not listening to it. So if I was in pain, I was like, I can't deal with that right now. I have a job to do. And I would push the pain down and I would ignore it. If I was hungry, if I was tired, if I was upset, if I was overwhelmed, if I was stressed, whatever the sensation was, that was something I couldn't deal with. It was actually interrupting my process of getting the thing done.
Right.
So what do you do when you're actually like, you can't, and people would tell me, well, you just need more sleep. You need to take stuff off your plate. You just need to rest. And I'm like, I can't, right? If I quit school,
Right.
I don't have an education. If I quit my job, I can't pay rent. My daughter's not going to stop needing me. She's a little
Right.
kid, right? And the only way I know is, like an abusive environment. I need to learn a different environment so that I can have a different life. So none of those things was really negotiable. So
Right.
what do you do? Because we were talking about super women who are just like this all the time and not, up and down. What do you do when you're a woman or a person who is up like this all the time, but it's because you need to survive?
Well, if there's things we have to do, that we know we're going to have to do anyway. One solution is to reframe the way we view those things. And we can reframe it by noticing what's happening in our body. We don't suppress the pain, we feel it, but we keep going. So we still allow the signals through, but we keep going. Or we reframe it, this is a totally different situation, but when I was in acupuncture school, we were coming up for our exams, and this is 4 years of work, and you either pass or you fail. I made a choice. I wasn't going to be stressed about the exam. So, I mean, that's not the same as your situation, but
Right.
it's similar idea.
How did you do that? How did you
I just
not
made a
be
decision.
stressed
I'm
about
not.
the exam?
Well, I think what happened was, and I did the same amount of work, but we can't control our thoughts, but we can always control our focus.
Okay.
So by shifting my focus from what if I fail, what if I fail, what if I fail, to this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to put the same amount of hours in, but I'm going to notice my body and relax as I'm doing it. That makes a huge difference.
Okay.
So stuff we have to do to survive, but the way we relate to what we have to do can be different.
Okay. And also knowing that sometimes the sine wave of life you were talking about, right?
Right.
I've found that sometimes the sine wave is like quick up and down, and sometimes it's longer ups and downs. And so the cycle I was in was, I needed to finish school and I needed to raise a kid and I needed to do all that. My sine wave ended up just being longer.
Right.
So if there's anything you can do to shorten the sine wave, that's going to benefit you. And if not, at least having the mindset of the sine wave. So knowing that you can't sustain busy, 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 busy all the time, that you need some downtime, even if it's not for a few years, right?
Yeah.
And being able to take those breaks while you're in the stress. So if I would have known the things like the
Right, the jaw.
the jaw dropping, the square breathing, and
Yeah.
those sorts of things, then I could have incorporated in the body sensation. If I would have known how to not block out all my body sensations and ignore them, I think the outcome would have been a lot different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So trauma is really interesting. Because of the self-defense work and the sacred sexuality work that I've done, I've encountered a lot of people who, and as an acupuncturist, a lot of people that have been through traumatic experiences, vets and women and all kinds of folks. And one of the things I believe, or I've noticed, is that all trauma happens in a high adrenaline state.
Okay.
So when we're traumatized, that we take on that imprint under high adrenaline. Either physical trauma or emotional trauma happens in a high adrenaline state. My conclusion about that is that there's two ways to navigate people that have been traumatized. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert in trauma, but this is just my personal observations, my personal beliefs. One way is to, when people have been traumatized, they're in a hyperadrenalized state, they have hypervigilance. So I've found that you can, one way of treating that or dealing with that is to get them into a parasympathetic state is through things like hypnosis or meditation or benzodiazepines, or you want to get them, kava, herbs, you want to get them somatic awareness. Those are all ways that will help us bring us into a parasympathetic state. For some people that have been traumatized, that really works. But there are other people that are wrapped so tight that the minute they start to relax, they panic. Right?
Because their vigilance center has to be kept high. They're afraid that that thing is
Right.
going to happen again, and they need to protect themselves.
So for like vets with PTSD,
Yeah.
a lot of the common treatments don't work.
Right.
Things like acupuncture works great for some people. They totally relax the body. I mean, how you can get people to relax when you stick
Putting
needles in
needles
them,
in there,
I have no
right?
idea, but it works for some people. For some people, it doesn't work at all. And my experience has been that for those people that where it doesn't work for them, another way of doing this is we create what we call sacred space, which is not religious or spiritual. It's more about creating a very safe emotional space. And within that emotional space, we will recreate the trauma in a safe environment, a safe supportive environment, but we give the body a different physical outcome. So if I was, like when I was a kid, I was assaulted and my face was pushed down into the snow and I was almost suffocated.
Wow.
So when I went through this myself, I had two guys on top of me. They're holding me down, pushing my face down into the mat. That'll recreate the trauma. So it's a high adrenaline state. But my body found a different physical outcome. In that scenario, my body found a way out to unwind because the trauma was locked into the physical helplessness. And if my body could find a way out of that, it seemed to help resolve the trauma.
All right. So when you're in the high adrenaline state, if you can run away or fight to survive,
Right.
that doesn't create as much trauma. But if for some reason you can't run away and you can't fight and the trauma happens, that embeds it into your...
Yeah, or even if
cells
you are
into your
fighting
body.
back and you're still, so say you were beaten up and you were badly beaten up and you're traumatized by that, even if you were fighting back, you can recreate that state, but you give the body a chance to win.
Okay.
And in that winning, somehow the limbic system unravels the trauma. Now the trauma is still there. It doesn't go away. It just, my experience is it doesn't quite drive the bus. So this is what we do in our self-defense classes. This is what is done in Mankind Project, which is a male initiation, a male rite of initiation for adult males. We will create a situation where we can recreate trauma and then give it a different physical outcome. Peter Levine is doing a lot of work with this in Longmont, Colorado. So he has a book called Waking the Tiger, really
Love
great
that
book.
book, so good.
So that's another possible way of dealing with adrenaline, sympathetic, parasympathetic response.
It's just redoing the scenario in a way that you win.
Exactly,
Right.
physically win.
Yeah, you physically win. Amazing.
Yeah.
You have some amazing self-defense classes. Tell me more about them.
The self-defense that I teach is called Fast Defense, Fear, Adrenal, Stress Training. And one of the things that we do is we will teach self-defense in high adrenaline states. And the intention of the self-defense classes are not to resolve trauma, but kind of a side benefit is I've seen that happen many, many, many times, even though it's not designed for that. We're not psychologists, we're not trauma specialists, we're self-defense specialists. But the way we do the scenario-based, high adrenaline, full contact self-defense is just what we described, where you'll have a scenario, we'll recreate a scenario, and then when people fight their way out of it, it seems to resolve trauma in the body. This work originally came from a man named Matt Thomas, who was badly assaulted as a child. And anyway, it's sort of a long story, but he was badly assaulted as a child, became a black belt. One of the women in his black belt dojo was attacked, and he felt like the self-defense training was inadequate. So he created something called role model mugging, which then became model mugging. And what I teach is called Fast Defense, which is a spin-off of model mugging. It was created by Bill Kipp and Peyton Quinn.
Okay. So how long does it take? I've taken martial arts classes because I've been traumatized many times. And I always had this sense that if I could just learn to defend myself, that I'd be safe, and that I could also kind of let my vigilance center down, and I wouldn't have to be so wound up being afraid that I was going to, be in that situation again.
Right.
And so I took martial arts, I took fighting classes, I took all sorts of things, and it seems like I put a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of practice into it, but I never felt confident that I could protect myself. How long does it take for you to train a woman to be able to protect herself in a way that she can let her vigilance center come down and she can feel confident that she's able to protect herself?
Right. Well, there's no guarantees, of course,
Sure.
about anything. But, the original model mugging classes were 5 weekends. There were 4 weekends of instruction, and then 1 weekend of a public demonstration of the work and a celebration for the women. Bill Kipp took all that work and condensed it into 6-hour blocks. So within 1 or 2 6-hour blocks, we can repattern the limbic system. See, what happens is when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, many people in a tense situation will freeze. That's a natural response, but it doesn't always serve us. So in our self-defense classes, we bypass the freeze response. And so what happens is we will recreate the high adrenaline state in a safe space, and then we create a scenario where people get used to navigating their bodies in a high adrenaline state. Under adrenaline, we lose fine motor control. So in our classes, we recreate the adrenaline state using very specific techniques, and we just use large muscle groups. So people aren't reliant on fancy techniques. It's all what I call assholes and elbows, right? It's basic big muscle groups, and the statistics that we've come across from women that have been through the class are very, very encouraging. And Matt Thomas has done some research on that. So we bring people up slowly. It's a very safe, supportive environment where we bring them up slowly through the adrenal states. As they get more successful, we add another piece to it. They get more successful with that. And pretty soon it's in their limbic system, because trauma is created in a high adrenaline state. The solution to trauma is created in a high adrenaline state. And that, because we bypass the freeze response. Many times after women have been assaulted, after taking the class, they don't even remember what they did, but they've knocked their attacker out.
Okay, so a woman could literally learn this in a weekend.
Yes.
And how long can she retain that information? Does she need to keep taking classes, brush up classes, to keep her, ready to honed and ready to protect herself? Or
well, it's always a good idea. Yeah, but I believe we've had people as long as 15 or 20 years later still been able to call up the responses when needed. So
it's relatively, so you can learn it in a weekend, and it's relatively permanently.
I don't know if it's permanent, but we've had long periods of time where people, the woman I teach with, Sabrina Mata, she was assaulted down at a beach here, and she knocked her attacker out cold within about 5 seconds, and that's very common. It's incredibly common that the women will, and their body goes into autopilot. They just react. They don't even know what they're doing, because we trained it in that high adrenaline state. Boom, it's there.
So you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
Wow.
The adrenaline is the anchor to the response.
Amazing.
Yeah. Another thing about trauma is when a cheetah chases a gazelle, 9 times out of 10 the gazelle will escape. And if you watch an animal after it's been, and that is the potential for a lot of trauma, because that gazelle is running for its life. What the animal will do is it'll shake afterwards. And my personal belief is that shaking helps resolve trauma in the body. So there are now classes for PTSD where they have people shake, and they also have those vibrating plates that were created by the Soviet Union for the cosmonauts that will vibrate the body. I used to do qigong on one of those, and I think this shaking or buying one of those machines could be very, very useful in resolving a physiological way to resolve trauma.
And motion, putting the body in motion when you have that adrenaline. Like, let's say you're walking down the hall and somebody jumps out and scares you, right? And you feel that rush of adrenaline. You're like, right? You have, when all those chemicals are released into your body, you're meant to fight or run away, which is going to take a lot of energy, and
Right.
basically using that energy like burns off those chemicals, so they're not circulating through your body anymore, and you can go back into the parasympathetic response. If you don't burn off all those chemicals through some sort of activity, I forget the exact number, but I'm going to say 6 hours. Don't quote me on it. But those chemicals are like circulating through your body for like 6 hours if you don't burn them off pretty
Interesting. So
immediately.
you'll take that on as an imprint.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if this happens all the time with people who have insomnia, if that happens at night and you don't burn those off, you've got the adrenaline running through your body and you can't sleep, and that's a big part of insomnia as well. And so the shaking, part of what it does is it creates that movement to burn off the rest of those chemicals so that you can get out of the hyperadrenalized state and go into the parasympathetic response. So one thing that I was taught to do is whenever I feel that adrenal response happening, to immediately, like within 90 seconds, do some sort of physical exertion. So whether that's jumping jacks or sprinting or whatever, jogging in place or doing the shaking, do something that's like big time physical exertion to burn that off, and that will also help you go into the parasympathetic response.
Sounds great. Yeah. One of the things that I was curious about for years was, I understand why we need adrenaline when we're swimming away from a shark or fighting for our lives or hanging off a cliff. I get that part. But I never understood why I would become adrenalized in a social relationship or in a personal or a romantic relationship. Why would I get adrenalized? I thought about it for a long time, and I finally realized that we're tribal creatures, and we need each other. We like to think that we don't care what other people think, but the truth is we care a lot what other people think, unless we're a psychopath. And that's a whole other topic. But most of us care a lot what other people think. And that, what I call the social mirror, is very important. And because we're tribal creatures, if we are shunned by our peers or the people we depend on, we feel like our life will be threatened. As tribal creatures, they say a lone baboon's a dead baboon. Yeah. So if I'm shunned, I could die. And I don't know if you've ever been in a bunch of people having a conversation and one person won't look at you. That feeling you get?
Yeah.
And it's devastating.
Right. Well, and you're freaked out. You're scared. It's just like this sinking feeling.
Exactly.
Like, oh, crap.
That's a very natural response. So that's because you're being shunned, or in some cultures, shunning is a way of controlling people. So in personal relationships, one of the things that I find is most challenging is navigating what I call shadow, which is a Jungian term. And shadow is the things about ourselves that we don't want to look at, that we deny, avoid, and repress. When we're growing up as children, we all suppress a certain part of ourselves in order to survive. And that we spend, 20 years creating our shadow, and then if we're lucky, 60 to 80 more years navigating, trying to get it back, trying to reclamation. Because I have a personal belief that the reclamation of shadow is the reclamation of the self and the reclamation of the earth, as we said before. So the idea of shadow in relationship is very tricky. And, there's the idea of projection. I have something about myself I don't want to look at, and I talk about those people, those jerks out there. Look at them doing that thing. When really I'm afraid I'm going to do it, or I'm ashamed of the fact that I've done it. Yeah. So that happens all the time in relationships, in all relationships that I know of.
Many of the people I work with, that's where most of their stress comes from, right? There's relationship stress with their boss, relationship stress with their kids, relationship stress with their spouse, or their significant others or family.
Right. Yeah. So in order to navigate a relationship and to navigate the adrenaline in a relationship, I have a belief that we need to understand what a healthy psyche is. What does it mean to be a healthy, emotionally healthy human being? Some people call it emotional intelligence. My partner and I call it emotional integrity. But what does it mean to be a healthy human being? And in our classes we deal with that structure that we believe is what would embody a healthy relationship. So in the relationship, we get triggered. And there's inappropriate behavior and appropriate behavior. So if somebody steals my wallet or somebody insults me, it's natural to be triggered, to be adrenalized. And then there's a reason, that's a reasonable response for that.
Right.
But sometimes in relationship, so we're not being physically threatened, but somebody will say something that's very wounding. And in my world, my belief or my hallucination is that when I'm triggered in a relationship and my partner is behaving in a way that's appropriate, that's my shadow.
Okay.
So when I get triggered, that means there's something in me that needs to be healed, and that adrenaline points to where I need to look in myself.
David, you talk a lot about shadow and how that is associated with the adrenaline response. Can we talk more about what is shadow?
Yeah, well, that's my sort of take on it. That's my perception of it. So shadow is the parts of ourselves that we deny, avoid, and repress. The parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. The parts of ourselves that we don't like. I think we spoke about this before, but when we're children, we have to push a part of ourselves down in order to survive. And that part that we push down is called shadow. It's a Jungian term. And basically, it is the part of ourselves, our shadow is in our inability to see ourselves clearly. And so we avoid parts of ourselves because we've rejected them as children. And in order to integrate, in order to create whole and healthy relationships, my personal belief is we need to re-embrace our shadow. It never goes away completely, but we can integrate it into ourselves, we can own it, we can claim it, and then we can navigate it based on what we know about ourselves.
Just so our listeners get a more clear picture about shadow, can you give an example of shadow?
So for me, a piece of my shadow is that when I was a young man, I was beaten up a lot. So
Like physically beaten up?
Physically beaten up,
Oh,
yeah. So
okay.
I have sort of a hypervigilance around personal safety, whereas other people might not have that. So I'm very aware in social situations of personal safety and the safety about people I care about. So that's shadow. Some people, and shadow can also be our greatest gift to the world, our greatest gift to ourselves and to our families. So the things that are our flaws are also our greatest power because we put our power into it. So my ability to navigate situations and to see things ahead of time can be very useful in a situation that might start to go south.
So shadow might be like you're a person who's like super bossy, or you're a person who runs away when a stressful situation comes up, or you're a person who lashes out when you feel like you're being attacked, or
and oftentimes shadow will come out when we're children. We decide I'm never going to be like that person.
Right.
I'm never going to be like that person. And in saying that and in believing that, we repress the parts of ourselves that are like that person.
So for me, when I was young, my parents were very verbally violent. So there's lots of yelling going on, lots of criticism going on,
right.
Lots of physical violence going on. And I remember that exact conversation in my head, like, I'm never going to be like them, right? And so what did I do? I repressed all that. Anytime I felt angry, I internalized it. Anytime I felt like yelling, I internalized it. Anytime I felt like lashing out or being physically aggressive, I just internalized it.
You turned it on yourself.
Turned it in, and that's part of my shadow is like I am violent to myself. I am I'm aggressive and abusive to myself because I promised myself I would never have that go outward.
And a healthy part of what they did, I'm not saying what they did was healthy, but there's a healthy piece of that, which is the ability to set boundaries. So when, I'm very similar, when I decided I'm never going to be a bully, so I become ingratiating. I don't set boundaries for myself. I'm a pleaser, I'm a yes person, right? So, and in doing that, it can backfire because then we can't draw on our power to set healthy boundaries.
So it can either be our poison, our shadow can either be our poison or it can be our power.
Exactly.
Depending on how we approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what shadow is. So it's the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at. And my personal experience and belief is that in my life, when we talked about adrenaline before as a way to survive, as a way to save our lives if we're swimming away from a shark or we're hanging off a cliff. But in social situations or in romantic love situations, when I'm adrenalized, it points to my shadow. When I'm adrenalized, it points to a part of myself I don't want to look at. So if I'm interacting with my partner and all of a sudden I feel the adrenaline, I'm starting to get angry, I'm starting to get irritated, I'm starting to rise up. In interpersonal interactions, that always points to shadow. So that's like a canary in a coal mine. That's an awesome sign that, Dave, your shadow's up. Maybe it's time to look at that.
Say more about that. That's super interesting. Maybe give some examples.
Another piece of shadow of my personal shadow was when I was a young male, other males would try to humiliate me in front of my partner, in front of my girlfriend. So I tend to have a hypervigilance around those social situations, even if they're not trying to do that anymore, even if it's not real, I'm projecting it onto them because that's my trigger, and even if my partner's being perfectly appropriate. So if I'm in a social situation and there's some sort of thing that I interpret as aggression towards me through my girlfriend, I will get adrenalized and I have to take a breath and go, okay, this is not me. Right? Now, sometimes men do that, but very, 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 very seldom now as an adult will that happen. Most men are respectful of boundaries and respectful of, basic sort of social skills in couples and relationships. But it happens occasionally, but most of the time it's my shadow. So if I feel that adrenaline, rather than blaming my partner or lashing out at those men, I go, okay, this is my stuff. What's really happening here? What's really happening is everybody's being inappropriate and I'm just triggered, so I navigate that. And I navigate that by self-soothing.
Okay. And we're going to talk about self-soothing in just a second, but before we go there, you mentioned before that facing your shadow and integrating your shadow is one of the ways to heal yourself physically and emotionally.
Well, I think it's at the core of healing. There was a sign above my office on the Big Island said healing before curing. And because my personal belief is that we can heal without curing and we can cure without healing, a big part of healing emotionally is accepting our shadow and seeing reality and then moving from that place of accepting our weak spots, the parts we don't like, and then moving forward. That moves us into, and that's the process of integrating. It's just a matter of being willing to look in the mirror. Do I like the guy I see in the mirror? And if not, can I accept my weak points? Can I accept my flaws and my shadow? And then can I use them to empower me? And the foundation piece of that is looking in the mirror and going, yep, it's my truth. This is who I am, warts and all.
And I've been going through that process myself, and the part I've been working on is my self-abuse and my self-aggression that I've turned all, I'm never going to be like that, so I turn it in on myself, and I never realized it. So I've been going through lots of coaching and counseling to help me even be aware that I'm doing that. And once I'm aware, then what I did is I was like, oh my gosh, I've been hurting myself all these years, bad, right? And I do more self-abuse, right?
Bad
how could you do that, right?
Right.
How could you ruin your life by abusing yourself? Bad girl, right? And
I feel guilty about feeling guilty.
Right, exactly. Right. And so, it took a lot of coaching to get me to the place to do what you said, where I can look in the mirror and I can say to myself, good job, you used all the skills you had at the time to survive and to handle things in the situation you were in, and great work, and be very gentle with myself. And now I want to create a different reality for myself in being gentle to myself like that. Then I could turn around and start giving myself lots of love. So every time I saw myself being self-abusive or very harsh on myself, those are the times when I can turn around and show myself the love that I wish other people had shown to me. And that's been very, very healing, and that's one of the ways that I'm integrating my shadow for healing right now.
And one of the things we can do is we can say, how would I treat my best friend this way? Mm-hmm. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a fucking idiot. But right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't talk to my best friend that way. Not a chance. So why would we talk to ourselves that way? Mm-hmm. And there's always a part of ourselves that is going to be self-aggressive and stuff, and that's fine. But navigating, the way we think and the way we react, and analyzing that, and just really looking at that and taking responsibility for it is, oh, it's a lifelong project, but it's really worth it
Yeah,
to create
absolutely.
integration. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to segue into part of this is knowing how to treat ourselves, knowing how to treat other people. This is all part of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and emotional intelligence, it's a very sort of popular term now. I think of it as I think of it as having two basic pieces. One is the ability to navigate our adrenaline, to react rather than respond, or to respond rather than react.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece is to have a model of what's a reasonably healthy psyche for somebody here in the West. It'd be different in Asia and different parts of the world, but here in the West, what would we consider a reasonably healthy psyche?
Okay, so let's dive deeper into like response versus reaction.
Okay, so if I'm triggered and if I just react, if I allow my emotion, my physiological response to dictate my behavior, I'm reacting. And there's only one, I believe there's only one thing in the world that I can control, and that's my behavior. And I can't control my thoughts, I can't always control my feelings, but I can always, at least in theory, always control my behavior. And that's what I'm responsible for. That's the only thing really that I'm responsible for is my behavior.
Can you give an example of like a situation that might come up that will adrenalize you, and
Sure.
then responding, and then another, and then how you would respond to that situation and how you'd react to that situation?
Yeah, so well, I'm sure you're familiar with, you're arguing with a partner and you're going back and forth and you get this kind of arms race, this escalation, and you're both getting really angry. And once my partner Jody and I, once one of us realizes we're adrenalized, we have a series of steps that we'll go through. But basically, if I'm adrenalized, I'm looking at my partner and I'm angry, I don't want to say something that's going to be destructive, because when I'm feeling angry, my desire is to hurt. I want to wound somebody. But in my relationship, I don't want to wound my partner. I temporarily feel that impulse to hurt, but if I do that, I'm crapping in my own nest, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm destroying the thing that I love the most. So I'm adrenalized, I want to say something nasty, I have some options. I can say to my partner, which is what Jody and I will often do, we'll say, okay, let's do a slow check-in, which is our way of communicating under adrenal stress. I may also say, I want to hear what you have to say, but I'm too triggered to talk about this right now. I'm going to come back and talk about it in an hour, or in a half an hour, or in 10 minutes, or whatever, and then I'll walk away. I can also go into active listening. I can drop my breathing and shift into my awareness to my belly and breathe deeply and just start listening to what she's saying and do what we call loving between the lines, or reading the air. And it takes a lot of willpower to override my adrenal response and really start to listen, but it can be done. So those are different possibilities.
Okay, so can we go into like dive a little bit deeper into reading the air and dive a little bit deeper into this slow response? Slow check-in.
Slow check-in.
Slow check-in.
Okay.
So take it step by step through the slow check-in, and then take it step by step through the.
So a
reading
slow
the air.
check-in would be something that my partner and I will do, where there's a lot of people that do different versions of this, but basically we'll repeat back what the other person says in small bits. And then we say, is that right? Is there more?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Can we do a quick example of that?
So give me an example.
Okay. Yesterday I went swimming, and I got in the water, and for some reason I got really scared.
So you went swimming yesterday, and you went into the water, and then you got frightened. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there more?
Yeah, and so then I got out of the water, went up onto the beach, and I looked over the water. I'm like, maybe there's something dangerous in the water.
So you have to do it in short pieces.
Right. So you
get
cut
out,
me off so I don't keep
right.
going too long.
So you got out of the water and you stood back and you looked and you were seeing if there was any danger. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is there more?
Yeah, and I saw that there was no danger, so then I'm like, I'm just being silly, jumped back in the water, and I started swimming again.
So you saw there was no danger, and then you got back in the water and you started swimming. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there more?
And then I got that freaked out feeling
Is
again.
there more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And?
And I got that freaked out feeling like I was in a horror movie, like Jaws was gonna come and like chew me.
And you had that feeling like, oh my God, I'm scared and I'm afraid I'm going to get eaten by a shark. Is that right?
Yeah, or shark or something else. And then I saw, oh yes, that's right.
So
I love how you're stopping me, right? Like I just want to plow through and be like, blah, blah, blah.
It sounds crazy. It sounds ridiculous to have to say, yes, that's right. Is there more? Yes, is there more? You know.
But it feels good. It makes me feel like you're listening and you're actively engaged in like making sure you understand everything I say.
And if this goes back and forth too quickly, we become adrenalized again. Especially if we're talking about something that's triggering to both of us. That's not a triggering topic. But if we're talking about you and me and going back and forth and oh yeah, you yeah, oh yeah, you, what about you, yeah, right? We get into adrenaline. But if you say, is that right? Yes. Or no, if it's not right, no, you correct it and then say, and you correct it, is that right? Yes. Is there more? Yes. That's a critical part of this, even though when I first learned this, I thought it was stupid because I know how to do this, you know, this active listening stuff.
You know how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it actually, it drops the sympathetic responses and then we can hear each other.
And there's something about you stopping me when I'm going too fast. And then and if I don't say yes, you're like, is that all? And if I don't say yes, you back up and you make me do it. There's something about you handling me that way where you're like, okay, I've got this handled. I'm in charge and I'm gonna handle you properly, right? And that really is very soothing.
Oh, good, because it can be triggering to me. Like she's, I know how to do this, right? But yeah, so and one of the things is you'll have a timer, so you'll get to speak for 10 minutes or so, and then we switch places. And it's like a miracle because we're not in our frog brain, our adrenalized amygdala. We are in our frontal lobes. I'm listening, I have to repeat back. There's a slow pace. Sometimes I call this NVC on Valium, right? So it's like this slow, painfully slow, active listening, but it really works. So that is a slow check-in.
Slow check-in.
The other piece of this is what we call reading the air or loving between the lines. So that's a way of seeing the subtitles of our partner. So we have to drop out of our adrenal space enough, get out of our frog brain enough to look at our partner and say, where are they coming from and what's their vulnerability in this? Because oftentimes when we're arguing with our partner, we're coming from a childhood wound. So if I can see my partner's childhood wound, and I can see them reacting from that childhood wound, and I see it very clearly, rather than just reacting, if I can drop in, take a step back and see their wound, I'm less likely to be triggered by what they're saying. So that's called reading the air or loving between the lines.
That actually happened to me just a few days ago. I was the third party. I was the observer of this happening. But my sister had gone with her kids to visit my sister-in-law, and there was some miscommunications, and she didn't receive the welcome that she wanted. She felt like my sister-in-law didn't want her there, like she was being like, swished away, and like she was causing problems. And so my sister had called me up and she had said like, oh, I can't believe it, like I'm so mad, like I took all that time to go over there and say hi to her, and she just like rejected me.
She didn't acknowledge me.
She didn't acknowledge me. And then my sister-in-law called me up and she's like, I can't believe it. Your sister just showed up and expected me to like drop everything in my life, blah blah blah, and then like I couldn't. I had plans, and then she's mad at me, like, and so they were both mad at each other, and so I did the.
You saw the inner child. You saw the
right.
wound.
So what I did with my sister-in-law is I said, let's back up, and I call it the second conversation. The first conversation is the thing we're talking with our words, and then the second conversation is like everything else that's going on that's not being spoken, right? The subtitles. So with my sister-in-law, I said, can we just like listen to the subtitles, and can we approach her with her intention in the subtitles instead of like what's happening on the surface? So I said, what if she was so excited to come see you, and she was so excited for her kids to see you and see your kids, and that's all she could think about for like a week was like, yay, I get to go visit them. And she showed up, and all she wanted was like a loving embrace, right? She's just like, oh, and she wanted you to be as excited to see her as she was to see you. And then when she didn't get that, she was crushed, right? And she just felt so bad and had her feelings so hurt because she just wanted this exchange of love. And when my sister-in-law heard that, the whole story changed. So instead of her being angry and bitter and like, why did she do this to me? She's like, oh, she just wanted to
So
give
she
love,
saw her
and she
being
wanted to
wounded
receive
rather
love.
than being entitled.
Right, exactly.
Right. So
And
same data but different interpretation.
and that totally changed the conversation, and then they were able to like talk it through together, and that changed everything because they were able to like relate on that level, on the level of reading between the lines or reading the air. Is that how you got it?
Loving between the
Loving
lines.
between the lines.
And reading the air. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are two ways to not to when we're adrenalized to not get into reaction, to get into response. So another example of this in my life is if a guy is being really aggressive with me. Guys get really sort of, I call it baboon-like with each other. Like, yeah, they want to puff themselves up.
Yeah.
If I see the little kid in there that's scared and wounded, I don't get as triggered. Whereas if I don't see that, if I'm loving between the lines or maybe reading between the lines of this guy who's acting like an asshole, right? And if I just see him as being a vulnerable little boy who doesn't know what to do, I don't react as much. And that gives me, then I can respond. That gives me many, many more choices. Where if I get triggered, he gets triggered, I get triggered, then we get into this, chest banging thing and sparks can fly, so.
Yeah, so to me it sounds like it's a difference between being empowered and acting from a place of empowerment, or being disempowered and then just lashing out in that adrenal response to fight or
Exactly,
run away.
and we can't do that if we're adrenalized.
Right.
That's why they tell boxers not to get angry when they're boxing, because they lose fine motor control. They, the first guy that gets really angry in a fight loses because he loses his timing. Yeah.
All right, so what is emotional intelligence? What does that mean?
I think of emotional intelligence as, well, there's two parts to it. Basically, it means being a grown-up, right? That's the short version. But that in the West, I think of it as two parts. One of them is the ability to navigate our adrenal response, to respond rather than reacting, to see things from other people's perspective rather than just our own, and to have social skills in the world. But also, I think it involves having the model for a healthy psyche. Like, what does it mean to be an emotionally healthy human being? And none of us ever really get there. We're working on it constantly. So we all, make mistakes, fly off the handle, lose our cookies. That's fine. But my aspiration is to become the best version of me I can be and to become a healthy human being. And what does that mean? What kind of person do I want to see in the mirror?
To be a healthy human being personally, but also be able to relate with other human beings in a healthy way.
Good social skills, exactly. So those are sort of nebulous ideas, but that's kind of my take on emotional intelligence. I'm sure there's books out there that give a more detailed breakdown of that. So emotional intelligence is crucial for, especially in work relationships or in romantic friendships. We need to be able to respond without reacting, and we need to be able to read the subtitles of our environment.
Now, your relationship sanctuary, is that a model of how to have emotional intelligence with yourself and others, or is that something
Well, I
different?
think it's a little bit different. It's a relationship sanctuary involves a lot of emotional intelligence, but it's something that my partner and I have come up with. It's a model for a healthy relationship. Like in the West, how does a healthy relationship function? So a relationship sanctuary consists of two different aspects. There's two personal sanctuaries. Each person has a personal sanctuary. And outside of that, there's the relationship sanctuary. Okay? So as far as a personal sanctuary goes, I'm a sovereign being, and my partner is a sovereign being. And we recognize each other as sovereign. We don't own each other. We can't really ultimately control each other. All we can do is honor each other and take care of ourselves within the personal sanctuary. Okay? So within a personal sanctuary, I have my sovereignty, and she has hers. She has her personal sanctuary, her sovereignty. I also know my core values. I know what's really important to me. So without knowledge of my core values, I don't know when a boundary's been crossed. I don't know when I'm in the wrong relationship. I have to know all my core values. And those are the things that are most important to me in my life. And my core values may be different than yours. They may be different than Jody's.
What are some examples of core values?
Core values would be, I need to have a partner who can fight without blaming.
Okay.
Some people, it doesn't bother them if their partner blames when they're fighting. They get really loud families and they yell and they curse each other and stuff, and that just they're Teflon, it flows right off. And for me, that doesn't work. So I have a core value of I need my partner to be able to get really angry with me without slinging crap. It's just one. So
and one of my core values is I need to interact with people who can provide radical honesty, so I can say the truth to them without sugarcoating it or avoiding, and I want them to be the same with me. So that's one of my core values.
Yeah. And then a question with that would be, what would be a deal breaker for that value? What does it mean if they can't? So do you mean that you can be radically honest and they don't get hurt?
Right. So for me, like, I just want us to be radically honest with each other, and then engage in our relationship around that radical honesty. So if they get hurt with the radical honesty, then that's when we have the conversation about that, and that's when we establish boundaries about, like, how do we want to be radically honest, how do we want to approach each other. But for me, just like truth telling and radical honesty is super important.
Awesome. So radical honesty is a core value. What I'm asking you is, how do you know if you're with a person where it's not a fit for you? What does it mean if they can't handle it? Does it mean that they don't react to it, or that they don't get angry, or that they don't lash out at you?
For me, it just means they opt into it, right? Like,
for
me, for radical honesty, as far as in my experience, radical honesty is a skill that needs to be developed and learned. And so, yes, radical honesty is going to bring up emotions and anger and reactions and stuff like that. But so for me, it's about the opt-in. Like, I'm opting in with you to practice radical honesty.
Okay,
and
conscious opt-in.
If we,
right.
Conscious opt-in, and then whatever happens, if it's reactions or anger or whatever, that's just part of our relationship.
So a deal breaker for you would be somebody who's not willing to opt into radical honesty. Awesome, great,
correct,
cool. Great. So so that would be a core value. For some people, monogamy is a core value. For some people, not having their partner even flirt is a core value. For some people, monogamy is not a core value. Or flirting, they love it when their partner flirts because they get to go home with them. So
or for some people, a core value can just be like, I need to be with somebody who's wealthy, or I need somebody that has a nice body and is beautiful.
Yeah, or somebody who doesn't drink, or somebody who does drink, or somebody who, whatever the core values are. So when we know our core values, we can then move towards, we start to have a good idea of what our boundaries are. So those are core values. Another aspect of a personal sanctuary is accountability and self-confrontation. If I screw up, I own it. I basically say, yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize, I was out of line there, how can I make this better? So,
What's self-confrontation? How does that look?
Self-confrontation is, Dave, you screwed up.
So that's coming from you, not
That's coming from me to
somebody
me,
else.
right? Yeah, no, I'm talking to myself. Dave, you screwed up.
Okay.
Right?
Without judgment and without guilt, just...
Yeah, hopefully without guilt and judgment, but a recognition that I did something because one of my personal values is integrity. And integrity means doing what I say I'm going to do. And if I say I'm going to agree, I have clear agreements with you, and I break one of those agreements for whatever reason, I own it, and I strive to do better next time.
Cool. Self-confrontation.
Self-confrontation, accountability, and then clear agreements. So what are the rules in this relationship? What agreements do we have? I really need you, or I really want you to wear red and go to church with me on Sunday, or I really need to have sex twice a week, or I really need you to cook for me, or I really need you to do the dishes, whatever. Or I really want, I should say. What are the agreements? These are the things I want. I may not get them, but this is what I want. And then and it's always put out as a request. It's never a demand. Let's just say we have agreements in our relationship. I'm home taking care of the kids, you're out bringing in the bacon. So I have a desire for $5,000 a month so I can raise the family well and you're out working. Well, if, say, two months in a row you bring home $4,000, I can say, look, I really need, or I really want you to bring home $5,000 a month, because otherwise this isn't going to work here. What can we do to fix this? As opposed to, you must bring home $5,000 a month or I'm out of here. Now you can say that, I mean, that's a demand, but things are best framed as requests. And then if repeatedly, if over 6 months, it goes down to 3,500, 4,000 every month, then we get a problem. You know, then I might say, and it's not even a demand. It's not like you have to do this. It's like, if you don't do this, I'm going to have to go. That's not a demand. That's a consequence. You know, because this is what I need, and it's down to a core value.
Okay.
So a demand is, would you pick up, a request is, would you be willing to pick up your socks? A demand is, pick up your socks.
Okay. Okay. What's the part about self-soothing?
Self-soothing is when we've been wounded. If there's, you know, if I'm triggered and I have to, if I'm in an adrenal state and I'm triggered in my relationship, I want to get out of my frog brain and into my frontal lobe, so I need to settle. So if there's always wounding in relationships, there's always pain, there's always emotional pain. We're never going to have a significant, deep emotional relationship where there's not pain. So in order to navigate that pain, oftentimes there's a need to self-soothe. I mean, there's a lot of scientific evidence that even infants will self-soothe. So we need to learn to do that consciously in order to keep our adrenal stress down, but also in order to just take care of ourselves.
So infants will self-soothe by sucking their thumb or crying or rocking.
Yeah.
How do adults do it?
I do it, well, I mean, you might do it by any way that makes you feel like, so you might do yoga. What I'll do is I'll just tend to withdraw for a bit and just remind myself of why I'm in the relationship, why I'm doing what I'm doing, what my mission is around work. I'm self-soothing, like if I don't get a job I wanted. I really wanted this job and it hurts and my pride is wounded. That hurts. I can go into a state where I'm sort of neurologically self-soothing, where I'm relaxing around the pain. We'll talk about this later in Shenpa. But I'm just allowing myself to go inside and just to take care of myself.
Okay, so there's self-soothing that's beneficial to you, but then there's also self-soothing that's not beneficial to you. So for instance, some people, when they get hyperadrenalized, they're stressed, they'll go take a bath, or they'll go do yoga, or they'll do some deep breathing, or they'll take a walk. Some people will start to emotionally eat and do self-destructive things. They'll go drink, they'll take drugs, they'll overeat, they'll do those sorts of things.
That's an unhealthy strategy, yeah.
So there's healthy self-soothing and then there's unhealthy self-soothing.
Right. So in order to create a really strong personal sanctuary, we need all these pieces. You know, we need self-soothing, sovereignty, core values. We also need the ability to, well, for me, is to be transparent. So if I'm with my partner, I need to let her know what's going on in me. Yeah, and and around things that are important.
What does that look like?
If I'm resentful about something that she did and I don't speak it, without blaming, but if I don't speak it, you know, if I own it, I claim it, this is my stuff or whatever, but, you know, I'm still resentful about this, that's transparency. Or I'm in shame about this. Or, you know, like when I get into shame, I get angry. And when I'm angry, I have to say, okay, what's underneath the anger? There's a wounding, there's a shame, whatever, rather than just lashing out. So if I feel the anger, even if I don't act on it, I'm looking underneath and I'm finding the shame, and then I'll speak that. Oh, I'm actually angry because I was ashamed or I was embarrassed or whatever that is.
So transparency is as simple as saying the thing, right? Like saying how you're feeling, saying, even just like saying what happened to you, and instead of keeping it all hidden inside. And
the level of transparency depends on the relationship. You know, I don't have to say to my partner, everybody that I'm attracted to. I mean, we're attracted to all kinds of people out in the world, you know. But, you know, if it's an attraction I'm obsessing around, or if there's something important happening that is going to impact the relationship, I want to speak that. That's my level of transparency. All the important things, every single one gets spoken.
So in healthy relationships, you don't wait for your partner to come ask you, like, are you attracted to anyone else, or what's going on with you?
You could ask,
but transparency is you giving that up.
Ideally, what we'll do is we'll ask if there are withhold. Do you have a withhold? Are there any withholds? We do that every other day or so. Any withholds? And then, you know, and sometimes I have to dig and go, oh yeah, there was something I was kind of withholding, and then I'll speak it.
Okay, so there's a way to incorporate a practice into your relationship to encourage transparency.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's stuff we don't want to hear. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. But you know what? When she speaks her truth to me over and over again, I can trust her. Because I know if something really big comes up, we're going to deal with it on the table clearly, and we're going to build a relationship from that. Individuating is another piece of a personal sanctuary, recognizing that I'm not responsible. I'm only responsible for my behavior. I'm not responsible for my partner's feelings, how they react to my behavior, just my behavior. So I'm myself, I'm not her, or I'm not him. I'm not responsible for their pain, their patterns. I'm only responsible for my behavior within my pain and my patterns. Boundaries. Boundaries are really critical. I need to know where my boundaries are. What are my deal breakers in a relationship? What are the deal breakers? You know, infidelity, lying, deception. What are my deal breakers? You know, and they could be different for everybody, but that having clarity and being able to speak those boundaries, being able to say, this doesn't work for me. This is not working for me. Something needs to change.
And boundaries can be even more subtle than just what are the deal breakers. They can be boundaries like, how do I want you to approach me? How do I want you to talk to me? What tone of voice would I like you to talk to me in? How much notice do I need if you're going to leave or be late or something like that? So boundaries can, be little things as well as the big deal breakers.
Yeah, I would put those more in the category of requests. So they could be boundaries if they're starting to impinge on core values. But that would be more like, I've been late 3 days in a row for our meeting. You say, listen, would you be willing to either show up on time or call me if you're not going to be there on time, or give me a heads up, or whatever as a request. And the person can always say, no, I won't do that, but I'll do this.
Right.
Then you negotiate. And then if you get to a point where I'm not doing it, then you can say, this isn't working for me.
Then the boundary comes in.
Then the boundary comes in, yeah. Something that can come up for couples is when one person's triggered and unraveling that trigger. So for example, if I'm triggered, one of the things I'll look at is, did my partner do anything? Did my partner break any agreements? Because we have clear agreements. So did she break an agreement? So if she did not break, I'll look clearly. If she did not break an agreement, even if I'm really angry, it's my responsibility. I have to look in the mirror, like the guy I'm going to see, and say, you know what? This is just my trigger. It's not about her. It's part of individuating too. This is my stuff. So I have to handle this on my own. Now, on the other hand, if my partner did break an agreement, that's a different scenario. So that's going to be more complicated, because not only did my partner break an agreement, but I also have my shadow to navigate within that dynamic. So if my partner broke an agreement, there's the issue of the agreement that was broken, and then there's the issue of my shadow that I have to work with within that. Now, it may be a deal breaker. It may be an agreement that was broken that was a core value or a deal breaker, and I just say, this isn't working for me, I'm ending the relationship. Or it may be something that we can work with. That oftentimes will require professional help, or it takes a lot of skill to sort of unpack that. The Hawaiians call that hihia, which is untangling a fishnet, where we're enmeshed with each other, and we're both individuated. It helps. We're both accountable. My partner can say, yes, I broke an agreement, or I can say, yes, I said I was going to do that and I didn't, and I'm sorry. And my partner will still have their shadow to navigate around my broken agreement. So those are two different things.
And there's another Hawaiian word about peeling.
Oh, yes, and then the other thing is called hihia, which is to peel back. So we're looking under the surface of the pilikia, or the disharmony, to see what's at the core. That's also part of loving between the lines, reading the air, things like that.
So it's very much about awareness, self-awareness of
Exactly.
what's going on inside of you, and awareness of what's happening in the relationship dynamic.
And what's appropriate in terms of our clear agreements. Just because I'm angry doesn't mean anybody did anything wrong. I could just be angry, and then it's my stuff, and I have to handle it. So all these things are parts of the personal sanctuary. There's accountability, clear agreements, self-soothing, core values, all these things, responding versus reacting, all those things. On top of that, we have a relationship sanctuary. So in my personal sanctuary, my job is to take care of myself, to live with integrity, to self-soothe, to self-confront, and to take radical ownership of my quality of life. I take personal responsibility of my quality of life. If my life's not working, I'm the one that has to deal with it. I'm the one that's responsible.
So
Nobody
no
else.
blame.
No blame.
No blame.
No blame.
It's his fault that I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah.
miserable.
If
Or
he
it's her
just-
fault that I'm
If
so
she was
miserable.
just not, if she would just be different, everything would be fine. You know, no. If my quality of life is ruined, it's my responsibility. That's called radical ownership.
Mm-hmm.
That's the personal sanctuary. Now, on top of that, there's a relationship sanctuary. And in a relationship sanctuary, my job is to make sure my partner is to watch her back and to increase her quality of life, or if it was a man, his quality of life. Once I've done my work, I have a strong personal sanctuary. My job is to improve my partner's quality of life.
How do you do that? Because I've worked with a lot of couples who one partner is trying to like improve the quality of life for their partner, but their partner actually resents it because it's not what they want, it's what the other person wants, right? Like, I'm trying to make your quality of life better the way I think your life should be better.
Right.
So talk about
then
that.
you're not in the relationship sanctuary. Then you're
Okay.
still in your personal
So
sanctuary.
in
You're
the
projecting, yeah.
Yeah, so in the relationship sanctuary, you're very clear about what sort of quality of life improvements they want.
It's their sovereignty, yeah. I mean, I
you're
might-
helping them
right.
with their desire instead
Yeah.
of projecting your desire on them.
My partner might think, wiggling my shoulders is really sexy. I think it's stupid. But if I want her to be with me and that's what she needs, I'll wiggle my shoulders. I don't care, But if or maybe she wants flowers. I don't need flowers, but she needs flowers. So that's recognition of sovereignty, and then that's watching her back.
Okay.
It's also about kindly giving feedback, kindly, because I don't want to enable somebody. If I'm just giving them what they think they want without talking about their shadow at all, that's not serving them. I don't want to enable them. So I want to give them feedback, but in a way that's very kind and very sensitive and not about blaming. So I'm supporting them in their growth. I may encourage them to stretch into their shadow. I may really listen to them and really hear what they need to feel loved, their love language, so to speak, and then do that. I have my personal sanctuary. I know what I am, but now I can afford to stretch and reach out. I can do whatever it takes to make their life as good as I possibly can. And then also reading the air, loving between the lines. I may know that she's upset, so I may do something differently. She doesn't have to say it. I'll read it, oh, she's upset, or I'll ask, honey, can I do anything, are you okay? Do you know anything I can do? I know you're in a bad mood. Do we need to talk about something? Are there any withholds? Whatever, And I don't have to be like collapsing, like, oh, honey, did I do something wrong? It's not about that. I can just leave an opening for her to share or not share, and then read what's going on and respond accordingly. So that's a relationship sanctuary. Without a strong personal sanctuary, you're just going to enable each other.
Be codependent. It'll just be
Right.
wild codependency.
And without a relationship sanctuary, you're not taking care of the relationship.
Right. It's
You're
just
not-
like
you're
two
not
people
two-
doing it on their own.
Yeah, you're just kind
under
of,
the
yeah,
same roof.
exactly. So, within a relationship sanctuary, I believe a relationship is a garden, and it takes two gardeners to make it work. Or if it's a poly relationship, maybe it's a triad, maybe there's three gardeners to make it work. But if all the gardeners aren't putting in their energy, the garden will not work. And in a monogamous relationships, it takes two people to create it, but only one person to end it. And always it only takes one person to change a relationship. A relationship is a system that people create together. And if one person changes, the whole relationship changes. If my script changes, the dynamic of the relationship will change. So if we think of a relationship as a garden, that's what the relationship sanctuary is. And the more we put into it, the more we do our personal sanctuary work, the more we build the relationship sanctuary, the more we're going to get from that garden. But if we sling crap, we break agreements, we don't self-confront, we don't self-soothe, we don't watch our partner's back, our garden is going to be destroyed.
So all those things are like the water and the sunshine and the fertilizer and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the seeds and the tending and the fence around it.
Exactly. And betrayal is, salt in the earth. Betrayal is salt in the earth of our garden. And, and contempt or scorn, like that's scorched earth. That'll destroy the garden. When you see that contempt, like eye rolling, what an idiot, what a bitch, right? What an asshole, right?
Contempt meaning
Contempt.
I'm better than you and I'm judging you for being less than.
When that shows up in a relationship, this is from John Gottman's work, but when that shows up in a relationship, that's bad news. So if we find ourselves in that scornful place with our partner, we better take a good long look at ourselves and see if we like the person we're being, and are we creating the garden that we want with our partner. One of the things that I do quite a bit that I found really helpful in my life is something called Shenpa. And I'm probably not transmitting this information well, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. So Shenpa is a Tibetan word, and it describes the stickiness of our thoughts. And so when I'm triggered about something makes me angry, I will react, and then so if I'm angry about something, oftentimes then I'll think about something else that makes me angry, and then something else that makes me angry. And pretty soon I'm down this rabbit hole of personal aggression and adrenaline and just sort of low quality of life.
And none of it's
angry.
real, right?
No, it's all created in my head, right?
Yeah.
It's all stuff in the past, right? So Shenpa is that thing that once I have the initial thought that gets me spinning. It's the stickiness of that thought. And there's this sort of perverse good feeling of all the things that have been wronged, all the ways I've been wronged in my life, and it's so unfair. And it's just like those jerks, and I'm going to get back at them or whatever. That's the Shenpa part, right? So Shenpa is the stickiness. So the practice of being aware of Shenpa is, so for me, when I have a thought and I find myself triggered, again, the adrenaline is the canary in the coal mine. It's adrenaline, and it's Shenpa. What the practice is to drop in and to treat that emotion, that anger, or whatever it is, frustration, sadness, as just a physical sensation. Value neutral, right? Totally value neutral. No, it doesn't mean anything. It's just the sensation, and track that in my body. And if I track that sensation in my body as a meditation, oftentimes the practice of that will unravel, and I won't spin out on other thoughts. And I can really experience myself as an emotional creature with physiological responses. And it's a somatic awareness to those sensations in my body.
So let's go through some
really
somatic
works.
tracking. Let's
So,
go through a situation of using Shenpa and somatic tracking to stop the spinning.
Okay, so I'm thinking of a situation now that really triggered me when I was a young man, okay? That is really stuck in me. So I'm thinking about that. So I'll experience it. I'll say, okay, I'm triggered, and I'll go back and I'll think the thought again, right? I'll put myself in that situation. And then what I'll do is I'll just notice the sensation. So right now I'm noticing my esophagus is tightening, and I'm feeling a tension around my collarbone, and it's kind of hot and tingly and unpleasant, but I'm just staying with that sensation. And as I stay present with that sensation, it begins to soften just a bit. Now it's a little tighter just above. And now my attention's on the tightness above my collarbone. And now I'm just staying with that sensation, and it begins to relax. And it's just like that. It's feeling a little less warm. It's feeling more relaxed. Like that.
So instead of the mental spinning, you're getting out of your head,
And
out
I'm
of
not
the
in my
story,
story, right, exactly.
out of the past and out of the future, which is the spinning in the story, and you're getting right into the present, which
Right.
is the sensation, the non-judgmental sensation in your body.
Right, the value neutral. So there's no story. It's just tension here. And yeah, this happened a long time ago. But this is the story. Rather than being in my head and spinning, rather than indulging in the Shenpa, I just go, the only story is physical sensations that have no relevant necessary meaning. They're just there.
And in Shampa, don't they teach that like sensations don't really last longer than 90 seconds?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? And so then you notice the impermanence of the
Right.
sensation, and the sensations don't stay the same. And so then you realize, like, even if you are in agony for whatever reason, that is going to change over time, and it's not going to stay the
Exactly.
same.
Right, and it's like the old story about the good wolf and the bad wolf. Which wolf do you feed, right? You know, I feed the wolf of awareness rather than feeding the wolf of my story.
And so using the Shampa practice can actually be a form of self-soothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I never thought of that, but that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only it's a little different than self-soothing. The intention is not to soothe, but it ends up being that way.
Right.
The intention is more
Self-awareness.
What's
and
real?
being in the moment.
what's happening. Yeah.
Being in reality. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is soothing, because then what gets our adrenal response up is the spinning and the past and the future and the story.
Right.
And once we can let go of that, that's automatic. And so the objective isn't self-soothing, but that's definitely the result.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you for this discussion. It was great to be able to lay this material out, and I've been thinking about this for years. My partner Jody and I have been working on this together for over a year, and I'm really happy. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being so generous with your information, and thank you for being so generous with your examples. Can you tell us where we can find out more about what you offer and what you do?
Yeah, our website is called sacredriversoflove.com, sacredriversoflove.com, and my partner and I teach gender communication, what we call emotional integrity, and sacred sexuality.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.